going on? Um, Living for happiness is the leading cause of your depression, my depression, anyone's depression. And a lot of people may be confused, but I'll explain why. Now, ultimately, we live to know the truth. And then we reflect that truth in our living. Our lives usually produce evidence of what we claim to know. And a lot of that has to do with certainty, fear of the unknown, and what we need to do to exude confidence to achieve our goals. But one thing about truth is that it leads to the purpose of life. And that ultimately has to come from the knowledge of a creator. Because life is something that exists um, outside of us, because we can't determine when we're born and we can't determine when we die, and the circumstances to which we created, which into which we are created, are they're very hard to place in your own hands, if I could say that correctly. Now, the purpose of life basically is to create a healthy need to know your creator, to relate to your creator, and ultimately find good favor with our creator, and to produce that eternal weight of glory to which all of life's struggles, trials, and tribulations are made worthy and worthwhile to go through. Now, living for happiness often places ourselves in our own way of discovering the truth. And that's clearly evident by the choices that we make and the reasons we make those choices. Often put ourselves in the situations we often hate. For example, people complain about the person that they chose to be in relationship with, but they often negate the fact that they chose that person. And oftentimes they chose that person based on something shallow, something vain. You choose a person based on looks alone, that doesn't determine how that person will treat you. And so, again, what is the value of looks if the person that you are attracted to treats you like garbage? And ultimately, the truth is what will set us free from the issues of this world, the evils that exist in our own lives that we can't escape from. Now, to speak to others, we can also say we can never make a person happy. We can just make a person feel happy. Now, most might not notice a difference in what I just said, but we've all done it in practice in our lives. If you ever, tried to make someone happy and still ended up unappreciated in spite of all your efforts, then you know what I'm talking about. And the reason you can deduce that it wasn't true happiness is the fact that it did not last. But it was just a momentary deflection from the brokenness and emptiness many still have and find little escape from. For example, when you rebound from a person to a new person, or you have not dealt with the issues of your childhood or the trauma in your life, and you're just seeking external pleasure to mask the real issue. Now, we have to live for truth, but that truth cannot be defined by ourselves. It is defined by our Creator and revealed by our Creator in our experiences. And also, living for happiness gives others, especially your enemies, too much power. Way too much power to influence your life and to steal that very happiness that you covet so much. Which is why we have to define our identity from our Creator. When we think about God, we think about His attributes, His characteristics. The fact that he is eternal, we seek to be eternal. And the part of us that is eternal, we want to rest with him in eternity. Because if you feel like this is finite, that you will cease to exist, then what was your life anyway if it has no meaning in the end? And what is the proof that it actually ever meant anything if the end means nothing? It's a self-defeating argument about there not being a God or creator, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but later. But your creator is your original designer, and he is the one that makes all things in life, good or bad, effective to either making you wiser, to improve you, expose your weaknesses so that you can be recreated into a more perfect creation where you can actually be the example of hope in this world. Hope for others, and to inspire and live the truth and change that you want to create. It's oftentimes we talk a good game, but are you living the change that you want to enact in others? Even the Bible says better is the ending of a thing than its beginning, and that's biblical truth, and it's very logical if you understand that you're an eternal being, that you're not just a talking lump of dirt that has no meaning, because you have to understand your body is just a covering. The mind and the soul of you does not evolve. It is you. And you're fighting your identity to diminish your identity. Now, you don't want to get on your deathbed and have a revelation that there is a God. That is not the time and the place that you want to have that revelation, because it will be too late, usually, in most circumstances. Now, from a life lived on its proper purpose, you will benefit from every experience, and it will produce the results of those experiences that will just make you better. But in terms of happiness, productivity, to increase your productivity, you often won't be happy. It will mean hard work, long hours, sacrifices. Personal responsibility will often mean that you will often admit when you're wrong, and you will take the consequences of your actions. That usually won't make you happy. To self-improve is a struggle process. You will have to challenge yourself. You will have to break your own limits. You have to go into unknown territory. And that leads to the fear of life. And that often will not make you initially happy, but the results will make you happy. And spiritual growth is the one that will least probably make you happy, because you will have to learn forgiveness, because you at some point in your life will need to be forgiven. And you will have to learn how to not think of yourself. If you ever have children, or if you are married, you have to lead, and often a leader takes all the brunt of responsibility and little benefit of the fruit of the results, because he's constantly protecting what he's worked for. And so often it will be a sacrifice, But it's very crazy, because we have to understand, what is the value of living to be happy, only to realize there is only happiness in living. And let me explain that. It's the journey. And I said this in the previous video. The journey is where you're able to experience all of life to gain the appreciation for things. We had to lose and struggle to know the value of things. And let me give you an example. People want to be wealthy because they know what it's like to be poor. People want to be happy because they know what it's like to be sad. People want to have a family because maybe they didn't grow up in a decent one. And people want to have children to offer the love and opportunities that they never had or received. And so it's often crazy how life proves that the worst of life often defines the value of things. And it seems life, again, it seems life is more defined through loss more than what is gained. Because what really determines the value of something is because it's plentiful or because it's rare. And most of us would never care to know our Creator, you know, if the need to pray or seek Him never presented itself. And then what would be happening next? We'll be left up to our own devices to repeat the empty desires that led to our own afflictions. Often we throw ourselves in the fire. We choose the people that we can eventually end up hating. Our own behavior can cause our own negative consequences. For example, being lazy often will cause suffering later. Being greedy will often blind you from being responsible, and you will lose what you have grown to depend on. Think how many folks didn't appreciate us trying to be happy. You know? It's really a very vain thing. And also it leads me into this happy versus holy from a biblical perspective. There's a consequence from living your life for pleasure. Think about children. What happens when children just live to do things that make them feel good? Oftentimes that leads to consequences that you have to train them to be prepared for. You don't tell your child, do what makes you happy. You teach them responsibility, obedience, rules. You teach them the hardships of life because it's not about happiness. This life we don't live in a utopia where you can just go around unchecked, being led just off your imagination. This, even in reality, there's a cause and effect. There's a reap what you sow principle in effect at all times. And holiness, which is basically, forget the holier than thou definition, but it makes basically to be set apart, to be different, to not follow the course of this world. We can all agree that this world is full of corruption and evil. But to be set apart from that is the true definition of holy. It doesn't mean that you're trying to be self-righteous. It means that you're setting yourself apart from the very corruption that you can clearly see and object. If times are really as bad as everyone is saying that they are, ask yourself, why are people living for pleasure? Why? Seems like we need to take our lives very seriously. We need to understand that wisdom, personal responsibility, having structure and order should be our defenses in a world, with so many traps and evils to destroy you. It seems living for pleasure alone is blind. It seems like pleasure should be defined as avoiding the negative consequences of living a foolish life. Now, that's oftentimes not going to make you happy, but the results of that life is happiness. So I just wanted to kind of break this down. It's a deep subject, man, but everybody's out here trying to live their best life. And just wait a while and you'll understand that led them to their worst life, whether it be in a divorce, whether they don't have a custody of their children, whether they have an STD, whether they end up going partying all the time and got shot up, in prison from selling drugs, living a fast life, blowing all their wealth. Life is a self-correcting process, folks. It really will prove what is truly good and what is bad. And with such an order and structure to life to survive, it all points down to the design and a creator who gives us a law and command to live by for our own protection. The only people who really want to be happy are fools. Everybody else just wants to be wise and want to be content knowing that everything in life has a purpose. Everything in life has a reason. And everything in life has the ability to make you a better person, to avoid the very issues that are destroying many other people who ignore them. So I'm going to put a pin in it right here. I hope it was clear. It's a deep subject, but I just wanted to make it clear. Peace.